The man who once ruled Hollywood with steely silence has vanished from red carpets and press tours, choosing solitude in a coastal California town over the glittering spotlight that made him a legend. At 95, the iconic director who gave us Dirty Harry and Unforgiven now spends his days far from the chaos of Hollywood, living life entirely on his own terms. This is what Clint Eastwood is doing now after stepping back from fame. Peak of fame. When Clint Eastwood first walked onto a television set in 1959, few could have predicted that this tall, quiet actor would become one of the most powerful figures in Hollywood history. His journey to the top began with a role that would define an entire generation's idea of the American cowboy, playing Rowdy Yates in the television Western series Rawhide. The show ran successfully for 8 seasons, and while Eastwood was initially paid just $700 per episode, it gave him something far more valuable than money. It made him a recognizable face in American homes across the country. Week after week, viewers watched him drive cattle across the frontier, and his natural screen presence began to capture attention from producers looking for the next big star. But it was a trip to Italy in the mid-1960s that would transform Eastwood from a television actor into a global icon. Director Sergio Leone cast him as the mysterious gunfighter known only as the Man with No Name in what would become the legendary Dollars trilogy, starting with A Fistful of Dollars in 1964, followed by For a Few Dollars More and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. These spaghetti westerns created a new kind of movie hero, one who was morally complex, spoke little, and let his actions define him. When these films were released in the United States in 1967, they became massive box office hits and established Eastwood as a bankable Hollywood star. His iconic poncho, steely gaze, and signature squint became instantly recognizable around the world. The success was so dramatic that just a year earlier, a newspaper columnist had written that people were still asking, "Who's Clint Eastwood?" By 1968, everyone knew exactly who he was. The 1970s brought even greater success with the Dirty Harry franchise, where Eastwood played the tough San Francisco police inspector Harry Callahan. The character's famous line about his .44 Magnum being the most powerful handgun in the world became part of American pop culture, and the 5 films in the series cemented Eastwood's status as the ultimate tough guy. These weren't just successful movies, they were cultural phenomena that defined what it meant to be a movie hero. While continuing to star in westerns and action films throughout the 70s and 80s, Eastwood surprised everyone by stepping behind the camera. His directorial debut came in 1971 with Play Misty for Me, and he quickly proved that his talents extended far beyond acting. By the time he directed and starred in Unforgiven in 1992, winning Academy Awards for Best Director and Best Picture, it was clear that Eastwood had become something rare in Hollywood, a true Renaissance man who could excel both in front of and behind the camera. His success continued well into the 2000s, with critically acclaimed films like $1 Million Baby, which earned him another Best Director Oscar at age 74, making him the oldest person ever to win that award. With over 40 films as a director and a current net worth estimated at $375 million, Eastwood had achieved something few in Hollywood ever do: complete creative control and universal respect as both an artist and a businessman. The breaking point. There was no explosive argument, no dramatic walkout from a studio meeting, and no public scandal that marked the end of Clint Eastwood's relationship with traditional Hollywood fame. Instead, his breaking point came quietly. Like the gradual realization that something you've done your entire life no longer brings you joy. For Eastwood, that something was the relentless machinery of celebrity culture that had grown around filmmaking during his 7 decades in the business. By the time he reached his early 90s, Eastwood had witnessed Hollywood transform from the studio system of his youth into something entirely different. The man who had once promoted his films with enthusiasm began to see the press tours, red carpet events, and promotional interviews as obstacles rather than opportunities. Friends close to the legendary director noticed that he increasingly viewed these activities as burdensome interruptions to the work he actually cared about making movies. The shift became particularly noticeable during the production and release of his recent films. While Eastwood had always been known for his efficient, no-nonsense approach to filmmaking, he began applying the same philosophy to his public appearances. He started declining interviews that didn't directly serve the story he wanted to tell, turning down award show appearances that felt more like spectacle than recognition of craft, and avoiding the kind of celebrity networking events that had become standard practice for Hollywood figures of his stature. Those who worked with him during this period described a man who seemed increasingly frustrated with what he saw as the superficial aspects of the entertainment industry. Eastwood had always been someone who preferred substance over style, but as he entered his 90s, this preference became more pronounced. He began expressing his disdain for what he called the current era of remakes and franchises, longing instead for the good old days when screenwriters wrote movies like Casablanca in small bungalows on the studio lot. The breaking point wasn't a single moment, but rather a series of decisions that reflected his evolving priorities. When asked about retirement in interviews, Eastwood would often deflect with humor or change the subject. But those close to him knew he was wrestling with a deeper question, not whether to stop making films, but whether to continue participating in the circus that surrounded them. His longtime friend and producer Tim Moore observed this gradual shift, noting that while Eastwood remained passionate about directing and storytelling, he had grown weary of everything else that came with being Clint Eastwood, the celebrity. The man who had once embodied the strong, silent type on screen was choosing to embrace that same silence in his personal and professional life. What emerged from this realization was a conscious decision to restructure his relationship with fame entirely. Rather than announcing his retirement or making grand statements about stepping away, Eastwood simply began doing what felt right to him, continuing to create, while refusing to play by Hollywood's rules about how stars should behave. This quiet rebellion would soon reshape not just his career, but his entire way of life. The Great Escape. When Juror Number 2 premiered in November of 2024, to outstanding reviews and a 93% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, something unprecedented happened in the world of Clint Eastwood films. The director himself was nowhere to be found. For the first time in his legendary career, Eastwood had chosen to completely absent himself from the promotional campaign for one of his own movies, marking the most dramatic step in his systematic withdrawal from the Hollywood spotlight. This wasn't simply a case of an aging director skipping a few interviews. Eastwood had orchestrated what those close to him described as a complete blackout of his usual promotional activities. There were no press conferences, no red carpet appearances, and no carefully arranged interviews with entertainment journalists eager to discuss his latest work. Instead, he had what one longtime friend called totally stayed home for the limited rollout, allowing the film to speak entirely for itself. The absence was particularly striking given the movie's critical success and the widespread speculation that it might be his final directorial effort. Industry insiders expected Eastwood to use the moment for reflection on his career or to address retirement rumors directly. Instead, he chose silence, letting others debate whether this represented the end of an era, while he remained conspicuously absent from the conversation. This strategic retreat extended far beyond a single film's promotion. Throughout 2024, Eastwood had been systematically reducing his time in Los Angeles, the city that had been his professional home for more than half a century. Friends noticed that he was spending increasing amounts of time at his various properties, particularly his beloved compound in Carmel by the Sea, California. the coastal town where he had once served as mayor in the 1980s. The choice of Carmel as his primary refuge wasn't accidental. This was a place where Eastwood had deep roots and genuine connections that existed entirely separate from his Hollywood fame. As mayor, from 1986 to 1988, he had worked on practical local issues, building public restrooms, creating beach walkways, and preserving historic properties like the Mission Ranch, which he had personally purchased and restored to prevent it from being developed into condominiums. In Carmel, Eastwood could walk the streets without the constant attention that followed him in Los Angeles. The town's residents had long ago grown accustomed to his presence, treating him more as a neighbor and former civic leader than as a movie star. This normalcy became increasingly precious to him as he entered his mid-90s, offering a kind of peace that the entertainment industry could no longer provide. The Great Escape wasn't just about avoiding publicity, it was about reclaiming control over his own narrative. By stepping away from the promotional machinery, Eastwood was making a statement about what really mattered to him at this stage of his life. The work itself had always been more important than the fanfare surrounding it. And now he had the freedom to prove that point definitively. Where are they now? Today, at 95 years old, Clint Eastwood lives quietly between two very different but equally peaceful worlds. His sprawling 15,949 square foot compound in Carmel by the Sea, California, and his vacation home in Hawaii, where he increasingly chooses to spend extended periods with his family away from any remaining traces of his Hollywood life. The Carmel compound, which Eastwood built for himself in 2010 at a cost of approximately $20 million, sits like a private fortress overlooking the Pacific Ocean. This isn't the flashy kind of celebrity mansion you might expect from someone of his stature, but rather a thoughtfully designed retreat that reflects his practical nature and love for the rugged California coastline. The property offers him complete privacy while keeping him connected to the small coastal community that has been his true home for decades. What makes his choice of Carmel particularly meaningful is the deep history he has with this 1 square mile village. While he no longer owns the famous Las Ondas estate, where he lived during his time as mayor in the 1980s, that Spanish Revival property was sold in 1996 and recently changed hands again for over $18 million. His connection to the area runs much deeper than any single residence. Eastwood maintains his ties to the community through his ownership of several local properties, most notably the historic Mission Ranch. This former dairy operation, which he purchased in the 1980s to prevent it from being turned into a housing development, remains one of his most treasured investments. The property includes a restaurant and inn that has become a beloved local institution, sitting on some of the most scenic land on the Northern California coast, with sweeping views of Point Lobos and the Pacific Ocean. His daily routine in Carmel reflects the quieter pace he has chosen for this stage of his life. Rather than the hectic schedule of film production and promotional appearances that defined his earlier decades, Eastwood now spends his time on simple pleasures, long walks along the coastal paths, rounds of golf at nearby courses, and quiet dinners at local restaurants where he's treated as a neighbor rather than a celebrity. The Hawaii property offers an even more complete escape from his former life in the entertainment industry. Sources close to the family describe it as a place where multiple generations of Eastwoods can gather without the pressures and complications that often come with their famous last name. Here, he can be simply a father and grandfather, enjoying time with his children and grandchildren in a setting that feels completely removed from Hollywood. Friends who visit him at either location describe a man who seems genuinely content with his choice to step back from the spotlight. The constant travel between Los Angeles and film locations that once defined his schedule has been replaced by this simpler rhythm between two homes that offer him everything he values: most privacy, natural beauty, and proximity to the people he loves. New life, new purpose. At an age when most people have long since settled into retirement, Clint Eastwood has discovered something remarkable: the freedom to work purely for the love of storytelling, without any concern for box office numbers, award campaigns, or industry expectations. His current approach to filmmaking represents a complete transformation from the career-building mindset that once drove him, replaced now by what he describes as working only on projects that genuinely capture his imagination and creative interest. This shift became evident with his recent film Juror Number 2, which he chose to direct not because it promised commercial success or awards recognition, but because the moral complexity of the story appealed to him. The film explores themes of justice and personal responsibility that have fascinated Eastwood throughout his career and his decision to make it, despite being in his mid-90s, demonstrates his commitment to pure creative satisfaction over any external pressures or expectations. Those close to him describe a man who now approaches each potential project with a simple question: does this story need to be told? And am I the right person to tell it? If the answer to both parts isn't yes, he simply isn't interested, regardless of the financial incentives or star power attached to the project. This selective approach has allowed him to maintain his artistic integrity while working at a pace that suits his current lifestyle and energy levels. His daily routine reflects this same philosophy of focusing on what truly matters. Eastwood follows what he calls a lean and green approach to eating, emphasizing lean proteins like salmon and chicken, along with plenty of dark, leafy vegetables. He limits his carbohydrate intake, avoids processed foods entirely, and drinks water instead of sugary beverages, habits that he credits with keeping him physically strong and mentally sharp well into his 90s. Physical activity remains a cornerstone of his daily life, though it has evolved to match his age and circumstances. Rather than the intense workouts of his younger years, Eastwood now focuses on activities that he genuinely enjoys. Long walks along the coastal paths near his Carmel home, regular rounds of golf at local courses, and outdoor activities that keep him moving without putting excessive strain on his body. The fitness regimen that has kept him vital into his mid-90s isn't about vanity or maintaining his screen image, but about preserving his ability to do the work he loves. Eastwood has often said that he plans to keep making films as long as he can still learn something, or until he becomes truly senile, and his dedication to health and wellness serves that larger purpose of maintaining the energy and mental clarity needed for creative work. This restructured approach to both work and life has given Eastwood something that many successful people never achieve: the ability to pursue his passion without compromise, while maintaining the physical and mental capacity to do it. Well, his new life represents not a retreat from purpose, but a refinement of it, focusing entirely on what has always mattered most to him: personal transformation. The death of Christina Sandera in July of 2024 marked a profound turning point in Clint Eastwood's personal life, bringing both grief and an unexpected opportunity for renewal at 94 years old. Sandera, a restaurant hostess who had been his companion for nearly a decade, died suddenly of a heart attack at age 61, leaving Eastwood to navigate loss while maintaining the extreme privacy that has always characterized his approach to personal relationships. True to his nature, Eastwood handled this difficult period with characteristic quiet dignity, making only a brief public statement about Sandera's passing while keeping the details of their relationship and his grieving process entirely private. His spokespeople, managers, and press agents have long maintained what they describe as complete ignorance about his personal life, a policy that Eastwood has insisted upon for decades and which served him well during this challenging time. What surprised those close to him was how quickly he seemed to embrace the possibility of companionship again. By the fall of 2024, just months after Sandera's death, reports emerged that Eastwood had entered a new relationship, though the identity of his girlfriend remains completely unknown to the public. This development speaks to a man who, despite his advanced age, continues to believe in the importance of human connection and refuses to let grief define the remainder of his life. Physically, Eastwood's transformation in his 90s has been nothing short of remarkable. He openly credits his longevity to a combination of strict dietary habits, regular exercise, and what he describes as an optimistic outlook on life. When asked about his health, he confidently states that he's in good physical shape and expects to remain so for a long time yet, displaying the same determination that has characterized his entire career. His approach to aging reflects a man who has always believed in taking control of his circumstances rather than accepting limitations imposed by others or even by time itself. The fitness regimen that has kept him vital includes not just physical exercise, but also the mental stimulation that comes from continuing to work on creative projects that challenge him intellectually and emotionally. Family relationships, however, remain one of the more complex aspects of his personal transformation. Eastwood's large and complicated family includes 8 known children by 6 different women, and recent years have brought ongoing disputes among his offspring that have occasionally spilled into public view. His daughter Catherine sparked controversy in 2024, with public outbursts against her half-siblings and former stepmother, creating tensions that reportedly led to her being cut out of his life entirely by 2025. Despite these family complications, Eastwood continues to prioritize spending time with those family members who bring him joy rather than drama. His Hawaiian retreat has become increasingly important as a gathering place where multiple generations can come together in a setting that feels removed from both Hollywood pressures and family conflicts, allowing him to focus on the relationships that matter most to him at this stage of his life. Rare glimpses. When Clint Eastwood appeared at a special event honoring primatologist Dr. Jane Goodall in Carmel in March of 2024, it marked one of his increasingly rare public appearances and revealed something important about his current priorities. Rather than attending industry galas or film premieres, Eastwood had chosen to support a cause that genuinely mattered to him: conservation and scientific research in the very community where he has chosen to spend his later years. The choice to appear at this particular event, while avoiding virtually all entertainment industry functions, speaks to a fundamental shift in how Eastwood now views his public presence. Where he once felt obligated to attend award shows, premieres, and industry networking events, he now reserves his limited public appearances for causes and people that align with his personal values rather than his professional obligations. This selective approach to public life extends to his famous rejection of one of Hollywood's most sought-after honors, a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Despite having a spot reserved for him and meeting all the criteria for inclusion, Eastwood has consistently declined to participate in the process, viewing it as exactly the kind of publicity-driven spectacle that no longer interests him. The Walk of Fame committee has made it clear that there's one spot left if he ever wants it, but those close to him say he finds the entire concept of paying tens of thousands of dollars for a ceremony celebrating his own fame to be contrary to everything he now values. His attitude toward this particular honor perfectly encapsulates his current relationship with celebrity culture. While other stars might see a Walk of Fame star as validation of their career achievements, Eastwood seems to view it as unnecessary pageantry that serves no real purpose beyond generating publicity. He appears more satisfied with the respect he's earned from peers and the artistic legacy he's created than with any additional public recognition. Industry insiders who have worked with Eastwood in recent years describe a man who remains fully engaged with the creative aspects of filmmaking while showing complete disinterest in everything else that surrounds the movie business. When a script genuinely captures his imagination, he approaches it with the same intensity and focus that has characterized his entire career, but he no longer feels compelled to participate in the promotional and celebratory aspects that once came with the territory. This approach has created something of a paradox in Hollywood circles, where Eastwood is simultaneously one of the most respected figures in the industry and one of the most absent from its social and promotional activities. Colleagues report that when he does engage with projects, his passion and professionalism remain unchanged. But he has drawn clear boundaries around what aspects of the entertainment business he's willing to participate in and what he's chosen to leave behind. The rare glimpses that the public now gets of Clint Eastwood reveal a man who has successfully separated his love for storytelling from his tolerance for fame, creating a life where he can continue doing the work he loves without the distractions that no longer serve him. No regrets. When Clint Eastwood speaks about his decision to step back from the spotlight, there's not a trace of doubt or regret in his voice. Only the quiet confidence of a man who knows exactly what he values and refuses to compromise on those principles. In the few interviews he still gives, Eastwood makes it clear that he views his withdrawal from fame's trappings not as a retreat, but as a natural evolution of someone who has earned the right to work entirely on his own terms. His attitude toward aging and continued work defies every Hollywood convention about when stars should gracefully exit the stage. When questioned about retirement, Eastwood responds with characteristic bluntness, stating that there's no reason why a man can't get better with age, and pointing out that his decades of experience have made him a better filmmaker, not a diminished one. He dismisses suggestions that directors lose their touch with age by simply declaring that he's not one of them, displaying the same self-assurance that made him a movie star in the first place. What bothers Eastwood far more than questions about his age are the changes he sees in the industry itself. He openly criticizes modern Hollywood's obsession with what he calls remakes and franchises, expressing nostalgia for what he describes as the good old days when screenwriters wrote movies like Casablanca in small bungalows on the studio lot, when everyone had a new idea. This isn't just the complaint of an old man resistant to change, but the perspective of someone who has witnessed the transformation of filmmaking from an art form driven by original storytelling into what he sees as a business focused primarily on recycling proven formulas. Despite his criticisms of the current industry, Eastwood maintains that he has no intention of stopping work entirely. He declares that he'll continue making films until I'm truly senile, a statement that reflects both his passion for the craft and his refusal to let others decide when his career should end. This determination isn't driven by ego or financial necessity, but by a genuine love for storytelling that has only grown stronger as he's gained the freedom to pursue it without external pressures. Perhaps the most telling insight into Eastwood's current mindset comes from his unusual friendship with Steven Spielberg and their informal retirement pact. The two legendary directors have agreed that neither will retire as long as the other is still working, creating a kind of mutual accountability system that keeps them both engaged with their craft. Spielberg has described their relationship as almost joking, with each regularly asking the other if they're ready to retire, only to receive a firm no in response. This pact reveals something essential about how Eastwood views his current life. Stepping back from fame doesn't mean stepping away from the work that has defined him for over 7 decades. Instead, it represents the ultimate achievement for any artist, the ability to continue creating purely for the love of creation, freed from all the distractions and obligations that once came with success. For Eastwood, this isn't retirement, it's the most authentic version of his career he's ever experienced.